I want the record to show that Tougie has not given me any heads up of anything that's happening today. So, yeah, this is going to be fun.
As is tradition, my friend, as is tradition. Welcome back, everybody, to the second Turnbuckle podcast. It has been a little while since we have joined you for a wrestling-based conversation, and that is because the end of 2023 was incredibly busy. I went off and got married, which
Wait,
is...
What?
I know.
How
I
dare
went
you.
off and got married. Then there was the holiday season. It was just a very busy time. We missed so much.
We missed
Pepsi,
you.
and we missed you. Pepsi Man returned to WWE, and there's been everything in between that's happened over the last few months. But as we rejoin you here, while we will talk about some of the more modern stuff, we're here to reminisce about the glory days. They'll pass you by. Glory days, because Crash, that is what you and I have discussed over the last little bit, is that we most enjoy getting to talk about the older stuff.
I think we've talked about it on stream too. Like when you factor in AEW, WWE, I mean TNA is back, Impact, whatever you want to call it, New Japan. Yeah. There's like 143 hours of wrestling per week. And that's without the pay-per-views. So there's just not enough time to keep up with the new stuff, unless, like, I still read the dirt sheets. I still try and keep my finger on the pulse. But I'm not going to watch Ash by Design, the former Dana Brooke debut in TNA. I love Dana Brooke, don't get me wrong. I got better things to do than to sit through 3 hours on a Monday and then 2 hours of NXT on Tuesday, and then
just
everything.
Just WWE alone is a lot. Now, obviously, it's Royal Rumble season. More on that in a moment. Ooh. But like you mentioned, there's 7 hours of mainline programming a week for WWE between Raw, NXT, and SmackDown.
Without a premium live event.
Right. And obviously, there's a lot of interesting things going on with that company that we haven't really been able to talk about over the last couple of months, and we're not going to get heavily into anyway. I mentioned CM Punk coming back. You have perhaps a new head of the table interrupting the story being finished.
I just want to point out that when we were talking about Cody Rhodes, I believe last WrestleMania season, I'm pretty sure that I talked about The Rock going after the head of the table. Just gonna throw it, whatever.
Yeah, I don't really have thoughts one way or another, at least at this point, in regards to what they do. I will say, if they go with The Rock over Cody Rhodes, then a lot of our concerns that we aired last year in our post-WrestleMania show would have turned out to be incredibly accurate. But we don't know yet, right? And that's a part of the excitement in the Rumble, and, who might show up? What's the status of Mercedes Moné, Sasha Banks? What's the status, you mentioned New Japan, of Kazuchika Okada, who announced that he is leaving the company. And while his contract apparently doesn't end until the end of January, and he has dates for New Japan up through the end of February, it's not out of the realm of possibility that guy could show up at the Royal Rumble. It's just not. Business is business. That could have been the deal. Is, hey, you allow him to show up at the Rumble, we'll let him do those final dates for you in February, and we call it square. Could be done. No problem. I mean, that's wrestling. He could very well be AEW bound. AEW.
We don't even know what's happening with MJF as much as we think, as much as there's rumors, as much as there's, talk that he has re-signed. Could you imagine he one-offs in the Royal Rumble and then goes and re-signs with the AEW? It would be tremendous. It would be so good.
If anybody were to do that, it would be him. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And on the AEW front, we, of course, are going to be heading to one North Kakalaki at the beginning of March, as you and I will both be attending AEW Revolution 2024,
I still can't believe this is
featuring
a thing.
Sting's final match, potentially against the Young Bucks from the looks of it. Also, Wrestling Observer reporting today that Will Ospreay is scheduled to be on that pay-per-view, as he's going to start up as a regular on AEW TV in February, apparently. That card's going to be insane. Like, we made the decision pretty early on, hey, let's get tickets for like $50.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can make the trip, then cool. And if not, we flip the tickets. And that was a very good decision because they are over 15,000 tickets sold for that event. We already have everything secured. So that is going to be a very fun trip at the beginning of March that we are going to talk about.
I get that it's not like upper tier, but you sent me, I think you sent me a text, might have been a tweet. Roderick Strong versus Orange Cassidy. I get it's not elite level booking or like top, but holy crap, is that ever going to be an amazing match? It should be. On paper, it should be.
I'm ready to sit in that arena for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Just having the time of my life.
I'm actually like, I don't even know. You kind of put everything all together and you try and plan it out in your head how everything's going to shake down and everything. Like, I don't even know the feelings of Sting walking down the ramp.
Right.
Having what it could be the worst match he's ever had. But then, knock on wood. But then the end of it as well. Like, I bet you we're there for an hour at the end of that match. That has to be the main event as well. Like, you don't put Sting's retirement match second or third last or mid card or open with it. That's got to be the main event.
100%. Yeah, and I don't think there'll be any rush for us trying to get out of that arena either, to be honest. I mean, that'll just be
you and I just sitting there just like, just absorbing it, just,
we'll record a reaction podcast from the stands of the Greensboro Coliseum.
Ooh, maybe.
That would be something.
Or round one sponsorship.
There you go. The ultimate bowling experience that we're planning on hitting up.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I know. You've talked about it so much. I know how excited you are for it.
I know more about that bowling alley than the ones in town where I live. I love it.
Well, Crash, today.
Yes.
I told you that I had today's show planned out, and I do, because typically our highlight of every episode that we had done was less about the current stuff and more about looking back in the history of wrestling. And if you do so throughout the month of January, you will see a lot of Royal Rumbles. And obviously it leads.
You're gonna go. I'm afraid.
It leads to a lot of talk about the history of the Royal Rumble, and I had an idea kicking around that, admittedly, I was beat to the punch on. I need to shout out Cultaholic Wrestling on the YouTube side of things, who did beat me to the punch video-wise before we could record this, but I am still going to run with the idea at the risk of coming off as a copycat. I highly recommend you check out their video on this, because today, Mr. Crash Andrews, we are going to be ranking the best matches in Royal Rumble history.
Okay. I thought you were going to sporkle me there for a second.
Not quite.
Running through like, oh my God, Triple H, Roman Reigns, Edge, Stone Cold, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Lex Luger. Can you, because Lex, like, you called them co-winners, I guess, right?
Indeed, you would.
Yeah. So, matches or Royal Rumble matches?
Both.
Ugh.
So what I have done is gone through cage matches rankings.
Okay.
of the top 32 matches to have ever taken place at a Royal Rumble.
Gotcha.
My initial barometer for this was anything rated over a 7, in which there are 50 matches on the dot with at least a 7.00 rating. But obviously, if you don't do 32, you got to do 64. So we had to lump off some of those matches. I do need to note that there are, however, in the history of the Royal Rumble, 5 events to not feature a single match with a 7 rating or higher.
I like it.
And I wanted to quickly go over these. The 1989 Royal Rumble from the Summit in Houston, Texas, highlighted by the Royal Rumble match itself, a 6.08, which was won by Big John Studd. A very weak card, to say the least. It wasn't even a pay-per-view, I'm quite
That's
sure.
what I was going to
Maybe
say.
it was.
Like the first handful were not highlighted as their own event. They were like, "Hey, we're doing a show at this place." Like,
Right.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan, the original winner. That
Mhm.
wasn't a Royal Rumble pay-per-view. That was just a Royal Rumble at another event.
Yeah, I think it was a special on the USA Network live from the Cops Coliseum in Hamilton, Ontario, if I'm not mistaken. The Prestige.
Yeah.
The second, you had to jump forward 5 years, the 1994 Royal Rumble from Providence, Rhode Island. The highest rated match was the tag team title match at a 6.87 between the Quebecers and the Hart brothers, Brett and Owen.
Ooh. Did that lead to the... That was on
the match.
On the path, right? That was on the path to Owen and Brett at X at 10.
That was that kick your leg out of your leg? I think it was.
No, that was Survivor Series.
Oh, you're right. That was Survivor
Series. Because Owen was the only... I think Owen was the only one who was eliminated, and you still had Bruce and Keith. that made it, and they were celebrating, and there's Owen pissed off, and I just kicked your leg out of your leg.
And then obviously Brett goes on to be co-winners of the Rumble with Lex Luger later on that night as well.
Right.
In another match that was at least over a 6, but not quite at that 7 threshold. We skip forward only 2 years.
Hold on. I want to line this up a little bit more, because Survivor Series would have been November
of 93 in Boston, Massachusetts at the Boston Garden.
And then they kind of reconciled.
Yeah.
And then this may have been actually where Owen turns.
I think it is, yeah.
Because the way that it would line up, like, Survivor Series wouldn't have been after this. It would have been before.
Mm-hmm.
So they were still planting seeds to this. He turns. I don't know if we get a match in between. Well, I mean, like, there was always the feud, and they were always fighting and everything like that. But I think the first match was because Luger and Hart both got a chance at Yokozuna at WrestleMania 10, and they gave Owen or Brett Owen.
Brett and Owen didn't have their first match until Mania 10.
Right. Okay.
I think you're overthinking
backwards in my head when we were talking.
The 1996 Royal Rumble highest rated match on the card was the main event, as The Undertaker took on Bret Hart for the WWF title in a match that went 28 minutes and ended via disqualification.
Boo.
Yeah.
You should never finish a pay-per-view with a disqualification or a double count out, or it should have a winner.
Right.
Now, if that means flipping Jey Uso shows up out of nowhere and helps get a win, it's still a win. At least it's not a disqualification or a count out or whatever. I think once you're at a pay-per-view, it should be a clear-cut winner regardless how they got there.
You have to fast forward 10 years for another defined weaker card. The 2006 Royal Rumble is yet another match or another card without a 7 or higher rated match. The highest rated match on the card was the Royal Rumble match won by Rey Mysterio. Of course, eliminating Randy Orton last, and that leads to the build-up and them having the triple threat. The rest of that card was interesting because the Royal Rumble was the fourth match of 6. Immediately after it, John Cena regained the WWE title over Edge after Edge had won it like 2 or 3 weeks before, cashing in Money in the Bank. And then the main event of the 2006 Royal Rumble was a 7-minute match where Kurt Angle retained the World Heavyweight title over Mark Henry.
7 minutes.
What a weird goddamn card, especially when you had Rey Mysterio going over an hour in the Royal Rumble.
To me, it's amazing that Rey Mysterio winning the Royal Rumble, because he, correct me if I'm wrong here too, he was an early entrant, if not 1, but maybe 2.
I think he was 2.
Yeah. So for him to go the entire way, and this is during like the Daniel Bryan push years before, but Rey Mysterio had that same mystique around him.
Right.
Heading into this match, everybody wanted to see him as world champion. He had to win the Royal Rumble basically to have a shot, and he wins it. And it's not a 7. To me, is a head scratcher. Maybe the match itself was terrible, but like the emotion around it was easily like over an 8.
I think the issue is you look at people who were in that Royal Rumble, and no disrespect to any of these people, but in terms of star power, some of the names in that Rumble: Viscera, Trevor Murdoch, Tatanka, Sylvain Grenier, Super Crazy, Simon Dean, Road Warrior Animal, Jonathan Coachman. Not the strongest field.
Yeah.
You know? And the fifth and final Rumble that didn't have one of those 7 or higher matches was the 2012 Rumble, which was highlighted in terms of highest rating by the World Heavyweight title match, or actually the WWE title match, I think, between CM Punk and Dolph Ziggler. This was also the year that Sheamus won the Royal Rumble leading up to the Daniel Bryan opener at WrestleMania 28.
Can we never talk about that match ever again on this podcast?
I'd prefer, yeah. I would prefer.
Shout out to Nick Nemeth, because we didn't mention he's jumped over to TNA in the recent history recap. A CM Punk Dolph Ziggler match should be tremendous, but like looking back, they never reached that star power to make that a main event. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a John Cena versus anybody. It's not JBL versus Eddie Guerrero. Like, yeah, 2 great workers. Dolph Ziggler would make CM Punk look like an absolute wrestling god. No pun intended to talking about JBL. But yeah, that as a main event match, looking back, doesn't quite do as much as some of the other matches that you have mentioned that still didn't get a 7.
So in terms of what we're going to do here, it's going to be tournament style. One, higher seed versus lower seed, and we are going to choose what match we prefer.
Our definitive winner.
So that's the thing, right? You can look at it from the perspective of what is just a better match quality-wise. You can look at it from the perspective of what match do you prefer? What match do you have fonder memories for? There's a lot of different ways to judge these and to look at them. And I think the way I'm going to approach this is, what match do I have fonder memories for, and what would be the one to be like, I'm going to go back and watch that one over the other.
I think for me, it's an on paper, because when you talked about this to say, we're going to look at all matches, I'm like, geez, I don't know if I couldn't name a Royal Rumble match outside of the Royal Rumbles. A Sporcle would actually be a hell of a lot easier. So I'm going to take it from an on paper and the era, almost like what I just did with CM Punk and Dolph Ziggler, of like, okay, their impact, how did it age? And would I go back as well? I think that might be how I do handle this as well.
So with that, our number 1 seed, the highest rated match to ever take place at a Royal Rumble, according to Cage Match, with a 9.47 rating, is the WWE Championship match from the 2003 Rumble. Kurt Angle defending, and we're going to have to mention his name a lot, against Chris Benoit.
On paper,
That
this should be a
match-
banger. Should be an absolute banger.
That match is squaring off against our 32 seed with a 7-4-8, the WWE Universal title match from the 2019 Royal Rumble, Brock Lesnar against Finn Balor.
Should have been better. I don't know why, I don't know why they don't book Finn Balor. Amazing worker. He's almost like the new Dolph Ziggler. Like they put him in the right spot, but they never really shine on him. But the only time Dolph Ziggler really has had a bad match over the past couple of years has been because of the booking, not necessarily because of his work. On this one, you can't vote against. Oh, you can, and there's a reason why it's number 1. But you can't. A Kurt Angle Chris Benoit match is an absolute, should be a masterclass in not only professional wrestling but just wrestling in general.
And it was. It is a match that lives up to the hype. Like that 2003 Royal Rumble was a solid show, but at the same time, to put it into perspective, the 2 matches before this, a 3.5-minute match between Tori Wilson and Dawn Marie in the middle of the storyline where Dawn Marie fucked Tori Wilson's dad to death. She oversexed Al Wilson. And one of the worst matches in Royal Rumble history, Scott Steiner defeating Triple H by disqualification in the World Heavyweight title match, where those two just stank out the joint. Scott Steiner, whether it was injuries or whatever, was gassed like 3 minutes into the match, and 95% of his offense consisted of suplexes. A horrific match.
Didn't this have the build-up to of the arm wrestling match?
The arm wrestling, the pose down, all
right. They
tried to go full Rick Rude Ultimate Warrior, and he went too far into the Ultimate Warrior territory.
Yeah, never go full Ultimate Warrior. And why do I have an image of bicycle short Triple H in this one as well? Is that this match?
So 2003, yeah, this might have been bicycle short era. 2003 was definitely the year of the bicycle shorts and of the different colored attire, like the red trunks, the purple trunks. Yeah. This was the era of that for Triple H.
Well, he went from, like, when you talk about like the purple trunks or whatever, to me that's him and Rock at SummerSlam with their IC title match.
Right.
But like he had just switched to the shorts, but got a groin injury and needed to get out there, as he does. And the best way he knew how was to throw in a version of bicycle shorts with the Triple H logo on the back, which was terrible. It may not be this match. I just, for some reason, him versus Scott Steiner is that brings up memories of the bicycle shorts for whatever reason.
With Lesnar,
I'm going Benoit Angle on this
same.
One. Yeah,
same. With Lesnar and Finn, I think it was, a good match with like the underdog story, but it was a little bit short, as a Lesnar title defense was going to be. This was the same Rumble that Seth Rollins won and led to Seth beating Brock in the Mania opener in New York,
because Brock did not want to hang around.
Correct. If I'm going to lose anyway, put us on first. Yeah. So
I think if Finn beat Brock here, I would maybe go that match, but because he didn't, I'm sticking with Benoit and Angle.
The 2 seed with a 9.44 The WWF World Heavyweight Title Street Fight from Royal Rumble 2000. Triple H defending against Cactus Jack. And that match squares off against our second match from the 2019 Royal Rumble, already the number 31 seed, the WWE Raw Women's Title match between Ronda Rousey and Sasha Banks.
I wanted to vote the underdog on this one until you said Ronda Rousey. And honestly, when you look back at Triple H and Mankind, such an unlikely pairing. Like, don't get me wrong, like, Mick Foley was just an unlikely professional wrestler. Every situation he was put in, he absolutely just knocked it out of the park. But then you have Triple H, who's like prim, proper, loves the, like, absorbs the business. And you have Mick Foley. But when those two were in the same match, in the same ring, on the microphone against each other, it just worked. It was tremendous. Like, I'm almost thinking of putting that one over Angle and Benoit if they eventually meet up. Like, that's kind of, I'm already thinking ahead of like, okay, seeing Triple H and Mankind again, I want to go see that again before I want to see Chris Benoit.
I recently watched the 2000 Royal Rumble within the past month and a half. This match holds up in terms of the spectacle of it, and I've been going through the 2000s pay-per-views with my wife because in December I was like, I kind of just want to go back and watch some old stuff, and I'm like, all right, she has discovered that she really enjoys battle royal type matches. So I put every Royal Rumble on a wheel decide, and it landed on 2000. So we watched the 2000 Royal Rumble, and she's like, that was pretty good. I'm like, you want to go to the next pay-per-view in the year? Sure. And then we have pretty much made it through the entire year.
It's amazing.
I think we're up to No Mercy. So she doesn't know that Kurt Angle wins the title yet on that show.
Don't get her to listen to the podcast. That's a spoiler.
She won't anyway.
Wow.
She likes wrestling, but not enough to listen to this.
2002 was Madison Square Garden.
2000. 2002 was Madison
No, I said
Square
2000.
Garden,
like 2000, the number.
2002.
Was Madison Square Garden, right? I saw this in a movie theater.
You saw Mae Young's fake.
Yeah, that's the only other than no, because if this match was there, I'm mixing up a whole bunch too. This was we also got Too Cool reuniting in the Royal Rumble match.
Yes.
Yeah. That's all I remember. Mae Young's puppies on the big screen. Oh, sorry. The prosthetics.
Yes, they were. They were.
I'm sure they were.
Anyway,
they weren't.
The chemistry that Triple H and Cactus Jack had at this time was insane. You had Mick Foley, who felt like his career was winding down, and it was. This was January, and by WrestleMania in March or early April, that would be his last match until the 2004 Royal Rumble. When he and Randy Orton are having their program leading to WrestleMania, and more importantly, the fucking Backlash match at 2004. So this was a very motivated Mick Foley against Triple H in his prime. Mm-hmm. This is over a year out from the quad tear. This is like peak prime main event heel Triple H. And these two go to war in what is a very violent match. The ending of the match is Mick Foley taking the face first, arms still pinned behind his back pedigree into thumbtacks. Absolute fucking madman. And I'm sorry that we haven't really talked about the other match, but it didn't have a hope in hell.
It featured Ronda Rousey.
See, the thing is, like, Ronda Rousey as a wrestler, I don't hate. You can talk about, she's one of many athletes that can't fucking stand losing, and it's that hyper competitiveness that gets her to where she was. But yes, it can come off as having incredibly poor sportsmanship. You can judge Ronda Rousey from the personal takes that she's put out there before. I've seen a lot of people, instead of her nickname being the baddest woman on the planet, I've seen them call her false flag Ronda Rousey. But around this time, pre triple threat women's main event at WrestleMania, she was doing really well. Her WWE run over like the last year fizzled out hard, especially her final match against Shayna Baszler, which I've seen a lot of people label as the worst match of 2023. But around this time, she was doing really well. And obviously, Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné, is still one of the best women's wrestlers in the world. This match doesn't have a hope in hell. And there's no doubt that the street fight's advancing.
Just on the Ronda Rousey thing, it's not so much the extracurricular stuff. It was very much the UFC is not NXT. The UFC is not building your way up.
Right.
To use a different example, Jake Paul has been a better professional wrestler than Ronda Rousey ever was.
Logan Paul.
That guy.
It's all right. I'm okay that you got them confused, but I figured I'd correct you so the internet.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm the old guy in the situation here. I appreciate it. But like Logan Paul, phenomenal athlete, known for other things, comes in and makes an absolute impact because of what he was able to do in professional wrestling. Ronda Rousey comes in, was able to do amazing things outside of wrestling, was not a good professional wrestler. And they put her into the main event because of the hype, because of the draw. Understandably so. They're not there to not sell tickets and have people show up and see Ronda Rousey in a WWE ring. She was not a good professional wrestler. I would never want to say that to her face because she'd put me in a Kimura and break my arm. Amazing UFC legend. UFC is not professional wrestling. It is not a stepping stone to get there. Look at Shayna Baszler. She's a former UFC fighter. She's got a couple fights under her belt. Went to NXT, went to, I don't even know where she was before, but had to work her way onto the main roster. Ronda Rousey shows up, points at the WrestleMania sign, and doesn't even get a championship match. Couldn't hold a promo. Couldn't hold her emotions in check while she was talking to other wrestlers. Like, it never clicked for me. Where, like, the other two in the triple threat match that you referenced, Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair, paid their fucking dues to be in that spot to main event a WrestleMania. Ronda Rousey did not. Good on her for being there. It just never clicked for me.
Our third match from the 2015 Royal Rumble, with a 9.29 rating, the WWE World Heavyweight Title triple threat match between Brock Lesnar, John Cena, and Seth Rollins. That is going up against the WWE/WWE Universal title match from the 2023 Royal Rumble, Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens.
If we're going by which one I want to go back and see more, part of me cringed when it was Roman Reigns, but I would rather see Kevin Owens in that spot than Brock and John Cena. Seth, yeah, I'll buy Seth. But just to go back and see a Brock Lesnar John Cena match, I'm actually kind of swaying to the Roman Reigns Kevin Owens on this one. I love Kevin Owens. I just love everything about him.
Did you ever watch his YouTube series before he went to WWE, his Weekend Escapades?
No.
Oh, I miss it so much. He would vlog his travel weekends. working the road and everything, and it just so funny, so funny.
Like even when clips of him in ROH pop up, like even there was him in El Generico where did he put his career up against his mask?
Yes.
Yeah, like and to see it now, it just popped up on my feed last week. To see it now and to see where they ended up, versus to see it in that moment, I can't imagine in that moment because they were hot as hell in ROH. But to see it now, I was
an ROH diehard at the time, and that feud was fucking incredible.
Right. But to see it now, to see where both of them have ended up, and to see the kind of work that they were doing back then, like I said, like there's few wrestlers that I will absolutely put on a pedestal, and Kevin Owens is one of those guys. That the other guy on the other side of the ring is Roman Reigns, who right now I think WWE has done an amazing job at tainting the desire to see him and creating a heel the wrong way. You could make an argument the right way, but the wrong way. I still want to see that match more than a Brock Lesnar, John Cena, insert Seth Rollins match. I'm actually going with the underdog on this one.
I think it's a matter of work rate against story. Not to say that Reigns and Owens wouldn't have good work rate, but it is main event Roman Reigns. He is what he is in terms of working the WWE style heavyweight title main event. You know, it's not that far off from how Triple H worked in 2006 or Cena in 2007. Like, it is what it is. Lesnar, Cena, Rollins from an in-ring standpoint was fantastic. But I think a lot of people would include the post-match of Reigns and Owens in the match itself, which included the Sami Zayn turn, the chair shot. I was thinking about
that actually too, yes.
The pop that broke the microphones, basically.
Yeah.
Like, it's really tough. Like, do you include that? Because it wasn't technically a part of the match, but it was a part of...
They didn't leave. They didn't leave the show.
You know, like that's a part of it. It's tough to say. I'm trying to think of another good example of this, but it's tough to say that the Sami Zayn face turn wasn't a part of the presentation of the match.
It's a catalyst of
it was the story of the match is that Sami was in Roman's corner.
Yep. So I actually wasn't thinking that because I again, the timelines and everything, I don't want to like over jump or overstate or anything. I'm even trying to get my timelines right.
Yeah.
But once you said that it was that match, this is a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer that the underdog wins this one.
I think that I'm in agreement, and I'll tell you why. There is something to say to go back and watch a great match for the sake of a great match. Yes. And that triple threat match was a great match. Yes. It is one of just 6 matches in Royal Rumble history with a 9.0 or higher. However, I can watch a lot of great matches. You know, Lesnar retains that title leading to WrestleMania, where he defends. That's the 2015 Rumble. That's where Roman wins and gets his hand raised by The Rock and gets booed out of the fucking building. But that's the Mania where Seth cashes in the main event.
Oh.
But we're not talking about that, you know?
Right.
For this.
So what is... here's... I don't think you can talk me out of the underdog on this one, but what is the next match? Because I know what the next match is for Roman Reigns, where this leads to.
Yeah.
Because the next match is Elimination Chamber. Right?
I'll have to look it up really quickly.
Reigns versus Sami Zayn.
Yes. Oh, yeah. For Roman. I thought you were talking like,
in
what's
Montreal.
The next match for
No. I am actually asking, like, what is the next match for Brock? Let's just leave it at Brock because he walked... he walks out champion.
Yes, the next match is Mania, because the next pay-per-view was Fastlane, where they did Roman and Daniel Bryan in the main event and had Roman beat him en route to Mania 31. So yeah, Brock's next match isn't until the main event of WrestleMania 31, where he loses the belt thanks to the Rollins cash-in.
So, what actually has more impact? Because I actually do put the Rollins cash-in. The three major professional wrestling moments, as far as I'm concerned, are the screw job, the birth of the NWO, and the Rollins cash-in. Because nobody saw it coming. If you said you saw it coming, you had doubt heading into how that match was laid out and how it was happening. And until you heard Seth Rollins, that was the only time you were like, I was right. So, to me, those are the you can call it modern era too if you want. You could throw Hogan body slamming Andre if you want to extend the timeline there. But Montreal Elimination Chamber, the fact that Sami Zayn didn't win, but how emotionally invested I was. And that wouldn't have happened without the overlap of the Kevin Owens Roman Reigns.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta go with underdog still.
I'm with you.
It's close. It is so close because I can't say what happens afterwards is a big factor, and I say it's one of the top three moments for me for professional wrestling is the Rollins cash in.
Right.
But
I think
it's very close. But you add that overlap, you add Sami Zayn turning on Roman Reigns at the end. This is an underdog. This is an underdog victory.
I think I agree. Like I said, the story of Reigns and Owens, what leads to, directly after the match, leads to Elimination Chamber, leads to WrestleMania. Again, the triple threat, an amazing in-ring match. But at the end of the day, it's the kind of roadblock, essentially, of just keep Brock busy because we know we're going with him and Roman. You could argue, and maybe it was the moment that they're like, oh shit, maybe Seth should win. But I'm with you. I think we go with the underdog on this one just for what it led to. And I hate to say it, but the guy who was in the corner of Roman Reigns, Sami Zayn's the one who just won this head-to-head because of 100%. The unbelievable pop at the end.
The impact of the one match had more impact to even current storyline this far out than the other one did this later on. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. There's
next head-to-head with a 9.28 from the 2001 Royal Rumble, the WWF Intercontinental Championship ladder match, Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit squaring off with a 7.56 from the 2020 Royal Rumble, the WWE Universal title strap match between The Fiend and Daniel Bryan.
Douchebag who's no longer alive, or person we fondly remember who's no longer alive?
I'll take point on this one.
Yeah.
It's the ladder match.
Yeah, okay.
It is the ladder match. I mean, the strap match was very, very good, but while that match, and like Chris Jericho's talked about it in his books, it's like, it sucks. Like it's a match that's never going to be celebrated again. Beyond the fact that it has a high cage match rating, as it should, because it is one of the best ladder matches of all time. I think just even looking from the perspective of like, okay, historical relevance or whatever, there's nothing from that strap match that immediately jumps out to me. And that could just be because of like my fandom, my personal experiences, but that's what this list is based off of, my opinions, at least, Crashes and what they equal out to. One of the most iconic moments in wrestling history, depending on what age you are, is the walls of Jericho at the top of the ladder. immortalized in the video games. I mean, that almost wins it for me, despite the fact that the rest of the match is of extremely high quality. Um, we don't need to get into the whole Chris Benoit debate, but
Right.
just
Right. And
looking
that's
at a match, its importance, the matches that Jericho and Benoit had throughout 2000 into 2001, really leading up to, like the early summer of 2001. Like they were right there in that main event picture. They go on to be a team against the 2-man power trip. The match on Raw where Triple H tears the squad leads to the King of the Ring, where they're in a triple threat match with Austin. And then not too long after that, Benoit's gone, from a broken neck. This was such an important match for those two. Whereas The Fiend and Daniel Bryan, it wasn't particularly an important match because it was two already established former champions competing for another title. It was a really good match, but I mean, again, it depends on like, okay, 2001, if you're like a 14-year-old kid, you're choosing The Fiend and Daniel Bryan.
right.
That is not the perspective for me.
No, and that's why I'm kind of stepping back on this one, is because saying the two, like, I would rather celebrate Bray Wyatt than give credit to Chris Benoit for the wrong reasons in this spirit of what we're doing here.
Right.
I also want to say that the Benoit Jericho combination, when was Invasion? Because Invasion would have been around this era too, correct?
It was later on this year.
Yeah. And I was at the Saddle Dome when, I'll bring this up anytime I have the opportunity to. I was at the Saddle Dome when Lance Storm super kicked. Who was it that he actually super kicked in the main event? But Benoit and Jericho were a big part of that show, which was kind of a catalyst to allow the Invasion to happen, which I actually have it could have been better, but I hold in high regard. So yeah, I retract the fuckery of Chris Benoit, and I'll step back based on your memory of the match and my memory of being at the Saddle Dome. I think it was actually one of Stu Hart's last events that they focused on as well. Just a little side tidbit or whatever. But Jericho and Benoit were a big part of that show as well. I just coined a new term, by the way. Fuckery.
I don't know if we can have that as the episode title, but maybe. Our next battle, with a 9.10 from the 2017 Royal Rumble, the WWE Championship match, John Cena against AJ Styles. And that is squaring off with a match from the 2011 Royal Rumble with a 7.75, the World Heavyweight title match between Edge and Dolph Ziggler.
I again, trying to line the timeline up, because you're way better at this than I am. AJ Styles hadn't won a title yet.
He was champion at this point.
Oh, he was champion at the time.
He was the champion. Yeah.
Oh, so this actually led to like the OC doing beat up John Cena.
This was the match, I think, or afterwards. Yeah, because they had the match at SummerSlam in 2016, and this was the rematch at the Rumble that Cena ended up winning.
Okay. Either way, like, that original run of AJ Styles and the fact of what they're doing with him now is criminal. As far as I'm concerned. Edge versus Dolph Ziggler.
Yeah.
Again. This isn't Ronda Rousey. This is Dolph Ziggler does not get as much credit as he deserves as a professional wrestler. Not only for what he did for himself, but for what he did for everybody else he was in the ring with. He made a 50, 60-year-old Goldberg look amazing.
God, that match.
Yeah, this is Cena. This is AJ Styles. Just basically, again, the OC run with those guys should have been, if they could have gotten the rights to the Bullet Club, if they could have brought, the fact that they kept Finn away, they could have really had more magic. But to be able to beat a legend like John Cena, I think is I love Edge. I love Dolph. It pains me to say, but I'm sticking with Cena and AJ on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am as well. You look at it from the historical perspective, right? In that, this is AJ Styles at just his second Royal Rumble. He debuted the year before.
Correct. Yep.
And by this time, here he is, already having been champion, having a great set of matches with John Cena. Whereas on the other side, if you see Edge and Dolph Ziggler, which who the fuck knows, that might be a match that we get in AEW this year, for God's sakes. It could happen. You see Edge and Dolph Ziggler in 2011, and you're like, that's going to be a good match. But Cena, Styles, the importance of it, the actual work of the match as well, there's no doubt. I mean, you look back at it from the Edge and Ziggler standpoint, this is a couple months before Edge has to retire.
Correct. Yep.
It's like that's the same 2011 pay-per-view where Del Rio wins the Rumble and then loses to Edge in the main of, or the opener,
he retires the next night.
Which, Jesus. But
if you're asking me, you've got a door on the left and a door on the right. If you're asking me if I want to rewatch Cena AJ or Dolph Ziggler Edge, I am taking the door on the right. If you're asking me in this tournament, the impact and the everything that led into it and everything that came out of it, I am taking Cena AJ Styles.
Fair enough. As we have Cena and AJ advancing. Our next match, the last of the nines, with a 9.01 from the 2007 Royal Rumble, the WWE Heavyweight Championship last man standing match, John Cena versus Umaga. Or as William Regal would say, Umanga. And this squares off with our first outright Royal Rumble match with a 7.60, the 2010 Royal Rumble match. Now, to take point on this one, the 2010 Royal Rumble match was won by Edge in his return from injury. It's very well known for CM Punk dominating early on and cutting the promos in the middle of the ring as the match was going on. It also featured Beth Phoenix entering the Rumble and eliminating the Great Khali, as well as the Shawn Michaels story of pushing for the rematch with The Undertaker, but falling short in one of the best elimination spots ever as he's holding on to the rope on the outside of the ring, and it just slips from his grasp as he's reaching for the ropes and falls to the floor below. It's a pretty damn good Rumble match, but it is up against, one of John Cena's best matches and performances of all time as he and Umaga beat the shit out of each other. It ends with Cena in the STFU with the rope around the ring rope around Umaga's neck. Again, I think you're looking at a lot of different factors in this one for what match advances.
I don't know if Umaga got another sniff at main event after this.
This was probably his peak.
Yeah. I think I'm going underdog on this one too. And mainly because of the Shawn Michaels. Because regardless Edge coming back, regardless CM Punk, regardless anything happening, this was one of those moments. We've talked about how investment in the product and what we get out of it. And this one still paid off long-term-ish. Like, it was, when I say long-term, I don't mean like a year, I don't mean 2 years. I mean, like, he goes to Elimination Chamber and finally gets the spot, I believe. Or does he even fall short in Elimination Chamber afterwards?
For Shawn?
Yeah.
That was where Taker was defending the world heavyweight title in the chamber, and Shawn pops out from the below the chamber, super kicks Taker, and costs him the title.
Right. I think because of the Shawn Michaels factor in this Royal Rumble and where it led, I think that's because I do remember like how this wasn't DX Shawn Michaels. This wasn't America versus Canada Shawn Michaels. This wasn't, this wasn't the Shawn Michaels we knew heading. This was a completely different guy. This was a guy who knew he was on his last legs. This was his last opportunity at one more shot at The Undertaker. And he wanted it. And we don't see that in wrestling. We don't see the guy fight for the spot. The spots are usually just handed, or there's a number one contender match randomly and it features your favorite wrestlers. This was a guy who was possessed to get that spot, and he failed. Most times it is that one shot, you got it, you're moving on. This was a long-term story. So I think for the Shawn Michaels factor, and like I said, Umaga didn't really have too many opportunities after that, or he kind of got relegated back down to the mid card. I'm gonna go with the underdog on this one.
It's so tough, right? Because 2007, it was a pretty strong year for Cena out of the gates, right? He has this match with Umaga, was supposed to wrestle Triple H at Mania. It ends up being Shawn instead. So he has that series of matches with Shawn, including the hour-long match at Mania, which was, the hour-long match on Raw after the Mania, which was tremendous. So it's another really, really tough call, because in terms of the ring work itself, obviously Cena and Umaga in a 1v1 match is going to outweigh a Royal Rumble. There's only so much that can be done in the Royal Rumble. It is match versus story. This is the toughest one yet for me. It really is. I think, oh man, I don't know. I don't know, man. It's just so tough because Cena and Umaga was so just good, and the physicality of it, and it's one of those matches that a lot of people look at for Cena as this made Cena, but it was the match that Cena had on a couple of occasions. He had some of those super violent matches. There was a match against JBL at Judgment Day in 05, an I Quit match that was tremendous.
He could have those matches. He didn't have them often because that really wasn't who he was. But put in those situations, yeah, he's good at having those very physically demanding, very violent matches. But they were absolute one-offs. Right? Again, going back to the beginning, I literally have no recollection of that match, but I do remember the Shawn Michaels storyline of trying to get at The Undertaker, and The Undertaker would just, no, you had your shot. While I have this title, you had your shot. Win the Royal Rumble, and you'll get me. Loses the Royal Rumble. Does not get a spot in the Elimination Chamber. Gets involved in the Elimination Chamber. And then finally pisses off The Undertaker enough to get that match down the road, which is when we did the top 10, what we thought were top 10 Undertaker matches. Shawn Michaels Undertaker 1 and Shawn Michaels Undertaker 2 were both on there for both of us.
I think for me, I'm going for the 2010 Rumble as well. At the end of the day, you need, not to say that Cena and Umaga didn't have story, but what the 2012 or 2010, I should say, Rumble match did in terms of everything that I talked about with the story. I just feel like that's the one to advance at this point. So we'll go with that, but that's a toss up for me. It really is. That could go either way, I would say. Next up, speaking of Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, with an 8.89 rating, it is the 2007 Royal Rumble match, squaring off with the 2002 Royal Rumble match that had a 7.61. Looking first at the 2002 Rumble match, this was Triple H's triumphant return from injury to secure a title shot against Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 18. This match also featured a run of dominance from The Undertaker that was ended by Maven, and a run of dominance from Stone Cold that was ended by Kurt Angle, but didn't really lead to anything. You know, Angle ended up having a match with, I think, Kane at WrestleMania 18. And then Austin was in a match with Scott Hall. You also had the tremendous return of Mr. Perfect. So, some highlights for that Rumble.
Right.
The 2007 Royal Rumble match, the middle of it, you know, you had some highlights, like King Booker did okay. Orton and Edge teamed up quite a bit throughout the Rumble for their moments. The most dominant person in the match was the Great Khali, who in succession eliminated Hardcore Holly, Chris Benoit, The Miz, Rob Van Dam, CM Punk, Carlito, and Chavo Guerrero before being dumped by The Undertaker. What this match is remembered for is the final 5 to 10 minutes, as it was Undertaker and Shawn Michaels in San Antonio, Texas, as the final two, with a mini match before the elimination.
Where does 07 lead to for WrestleMania?
Undertaker and Batista. Shawn Michaels would take on John Cena. Michaels would get his match anyway. This was the match immediately preceding Cena and Umaga on the card.
I have to be honest. Yeah, go ahead.
I would go with 2002. I think it is the more complete match with more interesting moments. The strength of the 07 Rumble is off of the back of The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels.
Mm-hmm.
And the drama of two legends going head to head. I think you would get better moments of those two going head to head in subsequent years at WrestleMania, especially. I think the 2002 Royal Rumble match stands out with a better field of participants in some ways, more memorable moments. And it's not a Rumble, like, no disrespect to that 07 Rumble, man, but Kenny Dykstra, Sabu, the Sandman, like a lot of ECW talent, Kevin Thorne. I have to go with 2002. I don't think the strength of the final, unless you say, hey, the final 5 minutes is where the drama's at and that's what matters. I just don't know if 5 minutes of a 56-minute match is enough to say it is better than the entirety of another Rumble.
The only argument I would have against that is what match stands out for WrestleMania 18.
Fair, because Triple H and Jericho was dead in the water at that pay-per-view. That's fair. 02 in terms, well, I think both in terms of follow-up fall short, right? Because Taker and Shawn didn't have a match at Mania. At least Triple H went on to, have a match with the champion, essentially. Not that every Rumble winner, of course, it comes down to like, oh, well, one of them has to go on that they have to go on to face each other. That's not the case. But I mean, Taker did go on to win the title at Mania as well, so I guess those two kind of equal out in that regard.
I'm not going to argue against. I just wanted on record to say the match that absolutely stands out at WrestleMania 18 is Hogan Rock.
Yes.
And it was going to be a good match, but nobody knew to what level.
Right.
And nobody knew it was going to be that.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with this Royal Rumble.
That's fair.
So, but to your point, 07 didn't really lead to anything of substance either. So, out of those two, I'm going to defer to you.
I was going to defer to you.
I'm going to defer to you with saying the match that really stood out at the next WrestleMania was dominated by The Rock versus the NWO. Right. Austin Scott Hall was iconic, probably for the wrong reasons.
A great stunner by Scott Hall in that match.
100%, the greatest. Yeah, they really went after the whole, let's put our big guys against the NWO in this one. Which again, I don't think that there was really anything in that Royal Rumble to suggest what they were building towards with the WrestleMania. So that's the only knock I can put on 02. But if it was just the last couple minutes too, that's a rough scene to sit through, like an hour of Royal Rumble to get 5 minutes.
It comes down to the final few minutes of the 07 Rumble versus, I think, a more complete package of 2002. For you, would you rather watch Taker and Shawn for 5 to 10 minutes or a more complete Royal Rumble match?
Probably more complete. Because if you're telling me it's the last 5 minutes, I'm fast forwarding to the last 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, really, do you want to sit there and watch Khali eliminate 7 people?
No.
All right. So, 2002 advances, another underdog moving forward. We get to a big one with an 8.72 rating, the 2001 Royal Rumble match, squaring off with our 25 seed with a 7.64 from the 2004 Royal Rumble, the World Heavyweight title last man standing match, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. To set the stage, that match in 2004 was the continuation of the Michaels Triple H feud that had really been going on since the summer of 2002. It was on again, off again, and they'd continue throughout 2004. By June, the Bad Blood pay-per-view, they had their almost hour-long Hell in a Cell match. For example, this match ended in a double countout in the last man standing match. It was your very typical bloodbath between Triple H and Shawn. I think the finish for a lot of people hurts the match, but it does lead to the WrestleMania 20 main event. You know, Benoit wins the Rumble that night, challenges Triple H, and Shawn saying, I still got unfinished business. He's mine. And it leads to, again, like, you hate to say it, but a match that won't be celebrated for obvious reasons. But the main event of WrestleMania 20, that triple threat match, is unfucking believable. It is such a good fucking match. And I think that kind of factors into this match and knowing what it led to. On the other side is what I'm shocked doesn't have a higher rating as the best Rumble of all time on Cage Match. The 2001 Royal Rumble, highlighted by Drew Carey eliminating himself. Kane setting at the time the elimination record as he went on an absolute run of dominance. You had The Rock and Big Show calling back to their Mania or to their Rumble finish the year before. And then, of course, Stone Cold, they tease him and The Rock, and it comes down to Austin eliminating Kane last. And I talked about the follow-up for the Michaels Triple H match. The follow-up to this was a bit rocky because, no pun intended, because Austin would go on to the No Way Out pay-per-view, losing to Triple H in a 3 Stages of Hell match, Yet he would still go on to the main event of Mania and beat The Rock, turning heel in the process. So it was a bit of an awkward follow-up, whereas I think, Triple H, Shawn, and then ultimately Benoit leading to that triple threat, I think was a more cohesive kind of story and continued momentum and build towards that match without a dip. You could argue that the 3 stages of hell loss for Stone Cold in 2001 was like the catalyst for the heel turn. Like, oh, okay, he lost his big match against Triple H the month before. Is his momentum, rocky? Is that why he partnered with Vince? If that's, the story that you think they were telling there. I think this is a pretty tough choice. How are you feeling about it?
I think for me, again, it goes the Shawn Michaels Triple H as a one-off. I'd be like, we've seen that a lot.
That's fair.
But Triple H to me was one of the kings of the double swerve. And I believe this is where this went into, which was the reformation of DX. Oh, just kidding. I'm not in your shadow anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now the big cheese. If I remember correctly, too, this led to brown pants Shawn Michaels.
That was a little bit before.
Was it a little bit before? Fair.
Yeah, so 2002 was that comeback match, the swerve about a DX reunion, the SummerSlam match where Shawn wins and then gets hit with the sledgehammer, and then that leads to Elimination Chamber in 2002, and that's the brown pants.
Right.
But again, this match was like a continuation of that feud. It was on again, off again, but
right.
They were essentially perpetually feuding for 2 to 3 years.
I think to me, it's those storylines were. I think it's a bigger storyline, a bigger part of the story than the match itself. So I'm going to go with the one with the Triple H and Shawn Michaels.
I think this will be very controversial. I don't know if the Honky Tonk Man can save the 2001 Rumble.
The Honky Tonky Man?
God, it is a really damn good Rumble, but we've incorporated a lot of follow-up to this, and there's no, well, I mean, again, like the more consistent build of what happened in 2004 versus like the kind of the shakiness with Austin. I think because I have really fond memories of that Triple H Shawn match because again, it was really good. Shawn was on such a run when he first came back too. It was unbelievable.
Which the way they kind of had it set up too, like he was still not Shawn Michaels. He was just a guy with a vendetta, with a bad back.
Yep.
Versus, like we said before, but we also said before, can the match be better than, or can a match be better than the Royal Rumble? And would you go back and watch the whole Royal Rumble rather than just the match?
The 2001 Rumble is a really good one to go back and watch because it is like the last Rumble of the Attitude Era and stuff like that. I will say an aspect of the 01 Rumble that I think hurts it is a lack of credible potential winners. You have Kane, The Rock, a returning Big Show who doesn't even last that long, Taker, and Austin. And even then you could argue like how believable was it for any of the 5? I think I'm going to go with the 01 Rumble and kind of put it into a tiebreaker here. And I don't know if we want to go off of the higher score or not. I do think there's a legitimate argument for that Triple H Shawn Michaels match. I do. And the follow-up to it. At the same time, at the end of the day, it comes down to the finish for me, which I think is what it comes down to for a lot of people with Triple H and Shawn, is that that match ends in a draw, even if it's a really good match.
Yeah.
But then you know what it leads to, and it leads to the WrestleMania 20 main event.
Yeah, we're changing the criteria, which is fine. Like it's opinion based, right?
Right. If I were to go with the 0-1 Rumble, do we go with the cage match scores, the tiebreaker, or what do we think?
I'll. This was your baby. You didn't give me any
I didn't
leeway
give you
here.
any
So
warning. I
if
did
you tell
spring
me
this
that
on
that's
you.
what we're doing, I'm moving on.
By
I'm
the
good with it.
narrowest of margins, we're going to move the 0-1 Rumble forward, but I do think that 0-4 match, it was close. It was real close. Speaking of the 2004 Royal Rumble, up next with an 8.69 rating is the 2004 Royal Rumble match itself, squaring off with the WWF Undisputed World Heavyweight title match from the 2002 Royal Rumble with a 7.64 rating, Chris Jericho against The Rock. To set the stage with these Rumbles, because it's worth the reminder, of course, this was the Rumble where one Chris Benoit went end to end from number one all the way to the win. This was a match that featured Randy Orton going on a really good run up until Mick Foley jumped Test of all people and took his spot in the Rumble to go out there and eliminate Orton, continuing their feud. It also featured Goldberg's Rumble debut, featuring one of the damnedest spears of all time on Nunzio. Still might be my favorite spear ever. Christian's up there, by the way, as well, for someone who took a hell of a spear. Leads to Brock Lesnar after a confrontation earlier in the night. Brock Lesnar comes out, costs Goldberg his spot in the Rumble, which would lead to Goldberg helping Eddie Guerrero the next month to win the WWE title. And then, obviously, their absolute stinker at WrestleMania 20. So there's time for that. And at the very end, Big Show goes on a run and is eliminated by Benoit. On the other side, Jericho and The Rock, a pretty good match. And, again, as someone who's read Jericho's books, holds The Rock in the highest regard as one of his best opponents ever. But this was another kind of cheesy finish where, of course, they were playing up Jericho as the heel and cheating to win and not really doing him much of a favor in terms of trying to legitimize his title reign. It was more just about like this guy's fluking his way up until he runs into Triple H and he can't fluke his way anymore.
I think it'd be hard for me to go against the Rey Mysterio argument that I had earlier. I think Benoit, everybody was ready for that. Everybody was ready for him to win. This was an emotional, at the time, this was a very emotional investment in Chris Benoit, and to watch him go run the board and go pin to pin, and for him to win that and get his shot, which leads to the image of confetti and Eddie Guerrero celebrating with him in the ring. Take out the guy, the only one who had a choice. Take that story out of it, which is impossible to do.
Right.
That image at that WrestleMania. So we go where it led to was one of the most amazing images in WrestleMania history.
Yeah.
That we cannot, as you say, we cannot celebrate.
Right.
So for me, I think it is the Benoit Royal Rumble here. It
is.
Jericho Rock, great energy, great the throwback to even Jericho's debut. Those two against each other, amazing. Doesn't hold a candle to that last image of that Royal Rumble.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't put forward the Michaels Triple H match from the same Rumble card. I can put this one through convincingly and still kind of get my way. And I think that was the deciding factor to the 0-1 Rumble going through. Jericho and Rock, good match, but the stories at the time, the follow-ups were abysmal. Whereas the 0-4 match, again, had the hallmarks of a good Rumble, stories, moments, including Ernest the Cat Miller having a dance break.
Somebody call my mama.
God, what a time. What a time. We'll move on to our next one here as we continue through the opening round. Of course, the opening round is the longest in terms of talking points, but we are chipping away here. Next up, it is another battle of Royal Rumble matches. With an 8.68 rating, the legendary 1992 Royal Rumble match squares off with the 2009 Royal Rumble match, rocking in at a 7.71. To recap these, 1992, maybe the most legendary Rumble of all time, the vacant World Heavyweight title up for grabs, secured by Ric Flair, going from 3 all the way to the end. You can kind of talk about the stories of the Rumble. Like, they did have some setup throughout this. You had Tito Santana and Shawn Michaels eliminating one another. That led to a match at WrestleMania 8. You had The Undertaker eliminating Jimmy Snuka, which led to that match. Savage and Jake Roberts had something going on. There were a couple of things here and there. The main thing that this is remembered for, I'd say, is Sid getting cheered and eliminating Hulk Hogan, only for them to change the crowd audio to Sid getting booed, which wasn't what happened. And then Hogan pulling Sid over the top rope while Flair helps eliminate him. And Flair wins the title after previously eliminating Randy Savage, by the way, which led to that match as well. The 2009 Royal Rumble, won by one Randy Orton. In terms of storylines for this one, Vladimir Kozlov went on a little bit of a run. The Big Show went on a little bit of a run. This was the fastest elimination of all time. Kane eliminating Santino. I wasn't ready. Which might be the best moment of that entire Rumble. Honestly, the story of this was essentially the legacy, with Orton, Cody Rhodes, and Ted DiBiase Jr. dominating the match, and Triple H eliminating the younger members before Orton got the better of him to win the match, which would lead to Orton versus Triple H. Triple H would win the title in February, and Orton would challenge him and lose.
Yeah.
For that reason, it's got to be the 92 Rumble, because Randy Orton in 2009, the psycho character, was red hot. Maybe not red hot, because red hot describes like Stone Cold Steve Austin, but he was the top heel in the company.
Yes.
And you completely ruined the follow-up by having the main event, like this heated feud where Orton had DDT'd Stephanie and then kissed her, and Triple H invaded Orton's home and stuff like that. And then you had the main event be a a match where Triple H could lose the title if he gets disqualified.
Right.
So you took away and neutered like any of the intensity that match could have had, only to have Orton win the belt the next month anyway at Backlash after their Mania match was completely overshadowed by Taker and Michaels.
The only argument against 93 is they really messed up having Hogan Flair in the WrestleMania that followed. Because what we got was Macho Man, Flair, and Sid versus Hogan based on where they finished everything, but everybody wanted Flair and Hogan at WrestleMania, and it should have been.
But I think this is a case of both follow-ups being botched, honestly.
100%. This was the first time we saw the WCW title on WWE at the time, programming, digitized at the time. Now it's not. Ric Flair in WWE, or WWF at the time, for the first time. Legendary. Absolutely legendary for the build-up and the follow-through. As much as we didn't get Hogan Flair, Flair Macho Man was amazing. If I remember correctly, Sid versus Hogan also featured Papa Shango and Ultimate Warrior.
Sure did.
Absolutely legendary. I'm going 93. No brainer. Like, there's, as much as I've outlined what was terrible about it, Randy Orton is an amazing worker. Randy Orton is one of those guys like Kevin Owens, hard to vote against. But when you've got Flair and Hogan in the same, Flair also helped eliminate Hogan from the outside, if I remember correctly too.
Hogan helped eliminate Sid at the end.
Oh, that's right, because he was pissed off. That's right, correct. Yeah, the star power that was in the ring, I would have stopped you at the beginning if we got Flair Hogan at WrestleMania. Like,
right.
You say 93, there's nothing. That should have been number one if we got Hogan Flair at WrestleMania, the number one seed. But there's nothing you can tell me about any very few other matches that would have me go, let's think about this one. This one's a no-brainer.
Right. For me, I would personally go with the 09. 92 will advance. It has the tiebreaker. I would go with 09 simply because I think the mid-card is more interesting in 2009 than it is in 92. You know, you're talking about spots in this match, the 92 being taken up by the Nasty Boys, Greg Valentine, Nikolai Volkov, Iron Sheik, a.k.a. Colonel Mustafa, the Berserker, Skinner, IRS. Where, you know, to me, the mid-card was a little bit more interesting in 2009, just in terms of the characters, the ability of the people in the ring. But yeah, 1992 will advance, I think, to the surprise of pretty much nobody.
Fair. Every Royal Rumble, though, like, it's not going to be 30 bangers walking down the aisle, right? Or 20 or 50 if it was the greatest.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think you're wrong in how you're thinking about that mid card as well. But having Hogan and Flair in the ring in the first time, keep in mind too, and I've said it many times too, I didn't have access to NWA or WCW at the time, but was aware of it to see Flair come with the digitized big gold on WWF programming was huge. Like, that never happened. Still to this day, barely happens that another champion from another federation or another company comes over with their belt. Yeah, that was mind blowing that they actually allowed it as much as they didn't at the time.
And with that, everybody, regrettably, our recording time for that session came to an end. But do not fret, we will be back very, very soon to continue on through our list and to decide, in our opinion, what is the best match to ever take place at a Royal Rumble. So make sure to stay tuned. We will see you very, very soon.